Hey, it's Captain Mike from Portage Fishing. In today's episode, we'll be working on anodes for the 2.8 liter Yamaha 4-cylinder engine. And they came in 150, 175, and 200 horsepower models. So stay tuned for all the details. Using a 10mm socket, remove the two bolts that hold on the top cover. If you want to, you could put them right back in place so you don't lose them. The rear cover is just held on by rubber grommets. Just pull it backwards to remove. Next, use a 10mm socket to remove the bolts that hold on the 4 coil packs. Using a spark plug socket with an extension, remove the 4 spark plugs. Top tip, this is one of those times when you want one with the rubber grommet. That way the spark plug will come out with your socket. Next, you want to remove any wire harness or hose that's connected to the valve cover. There's a lot of little clips that you could just attach. Some of them may have a couple wire ties that you may have to cut, but just make sure you go around and take anything that's attached to the valve cover off. Now, using your 10mm socket, remove all of the bolts that hold on the valve cover. These are all the same size, so you could just put them all in the same bag for later. Remove the vent hose from the top right portion of the valve cover. It should just wiggle off. Now you need to carefully remove the valve cover. There's going to be wire harnesses and stuff in your way, and you're just going to have to navigate around all of that. Don't forget to have some paper towels stuffed down in the engine compartment, because when the valve cover comes off, there's still going to be oil dripping off the valve train, and you don't want that all in your engine bay. Once you have the valve cover off, you can remove the old gasket. The shop manual wants you replacing this gasket. And make sure you clean out the grooves where the gasket was embedded real good. There's going to be some, oil residue and stuff in there. The gasket can only go one way on the valve cover, so just make sure it's pressed into the grooves real well. And I'm going to fast forward to think about when you're installing the valve cover. It's going to be vertical and you're trying to navigate around some hoses and wires and things. It's pretty easy for it to fall out of that groove. And in fact, on one of these two motors, that actually happened. And the valve cover didn't seat properly. Of course, I tightened it up, and the owner had a leak for a couple days. So, really make sure you get it seated in here properly. And then when you're installing the valve cover, take extra care to make sure that gasket stays in. Let's finally remove some anodes. There's 2 under the valve cover, and you'll need a 10mm socket to remove the 2 bolts off of each of the retaining brackets. If by chance you're having trouble getting the anode to come out, stick that socket on that center bolt and just give it a little turn, either tighten or loose it, and it'll break the seal and it'll fall right out. The last anode is on the lower left-hand side of the motor, and it only has 1 retaining bolt. So using your 10mm socket, just remove that bolt and remove the anode. All right, the easiest way I've found to remove these is to put them into the vise, put the anode, the flat side, clamp it in the vise, and using a 10mm socket, just back them off. If there's any salt or calcium buildup in here, you kind of want to scrape it out, clean it out. Let's replace them. When you buy these, you want to buy the anodes and new grommets. They're separate part numbers. Some of the suppliers online have them in a kit. So we're going to screw these on, start them by hand. And we'll hit it with the gun. Okay, last step for these is
put the grommets on. I'm going to put just a little dab of grease where the grommet goes. You don't want to get any grease on the anode itself, because that would protect it from the water, and you really want it to touch the water so that it does its job. I just put the grease on there and spun that around.
If you want, you could put a little dab of grease on the outside of the grommet before you insert it into the engine block. Start both bolts by hand and then tighten them up with a 10mm socket. Prepping for the valve cover install, you want to wipe down all of the mating surfaces where that gasket's going to touch. This next step is pretty important. You're going to use some RTV silicone sealant up in the corners of the gasket as it wraps over the camshafts, and just a little dab in each corner. And I'm going to show, there's a video inset here, try to show a close-up of that. And I apologize, it's hard to show any of this in really great detail, but hopefully you could get the gist of it. Yeah, I was talking about this step before, and it's probably one of the most critical. I was 1 for 2 on these motors. One valve cover I sealed up perfectly, and the other one, the gasket fell out while I was setting it up into place. This would be a good place to have a helper, hold those wires back so you could get the valve cover inserted cleanly without jostling it too much. Oddly, the shop manual doesn't indicate a torque specification for the valve cover nor a torque tightening sequence. So I still suggest doing it in a crisscross pattern, and they're M6 bolts, so the general spec in the front of the manual is 5.8 foot-pounds. We put a little bit of aluminum anti-seize on some of the threads of the spark plugs. Started them off by hand, and the manual indicates 20.8 foot-pounds of torque. Replace the 4 coil packs and tighten the bolts with a 10mm socket. Make sure you reconnect the wire harnesses to all those retaining clips. Hook up a hose and test that motor. And that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please hit the like button. Consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you, and tight lines.